Hello everyone. Let's subscribe to Relationship Stories before we forget. You won't want to miss what's coming up next.
Ethan sacrificed everything for Isabel, only to discover her ultimate betrayal. But Ethan isn't just an ordinary man. He's the heir to a billion-dollar fortune, and now, he's using that hidden power to destroy those who wronged him. Derek, the man who led Isabel into a world of debauchery, will lose everything, including his freedom. Will Ethan find peace in his revenge, or will the darkness consume him? Hi, I am Baba. This story was told to me by Derek. Ethan had always believed that love meant sacrifice. He spent his days working in construction and his nights delivering food, all to support Isabel, his wife, through her education. She had dreams, and Ethan was proud to help her realize them. He had never questioned the long hours or the toll it took on his body, because he believed that once Isabel reached her goals, they would both share the rewards. But over time, Ethan noticed changes in Isabel. She no longer showed the warmth or gratitude she once did. She had become distant, withdrawn, and Ethan found himself coming home to a cold, empty house more often than not. Isabel spent long nights out, claiming they were for networking events or school-related trips, but something didn't feel right. Still, Ethan tried to believe that it was just the stress of school. He had no idea how far things had truly gone. As the weeks passed, Isabel's behavior became harder to ignore. She started coming home with bruises on her wrists, neck, and chest, claiming they were nothing when Ethan asked about them. Some nights, she would walk stiffly, her movements awkward, as though she had been through something physically demanding. Ethan's concern grew, but every time he confronted her, she dismissed him or turned the conversation around, mocking his job or belittling his sacrifices. "You're still delivering food," she scoffed one evening. "You're just wasting your life, Ethan. You're going nowhere." Her words stung, but Ethan swallowed the hurt. He had worked tirelessly for their future, believing that they were in this together. But Isabel's coldness, the late nights, and the bruises all pointed to something darker. The distance between them grew with each passing day. One weekend, Isabel left for another business trip, and Ethan's suspicions finally overwhelmed him. He had grown tired of the lies, the coldness, and the sinking feeling that his wife was no longer the woman he had married. While cleaning their closet, he found a duffel bag Isabel kept hidden. With trembling hands, Ethan opened it and discovered skimpy lingerie she had never worn for him, sex toys, and BDSM gear. But what struck him most was the leather-bound journal at the bottom of the bag. Ethan flipped through its pages, his breath growing shallow as he read about Isabel's secret life with Derek and countless other men. The most recent entry, dated just a week before, turned his stomach. Isabel had described an unforgettable session where she knelt in the center of a room, surrounded by 6 men, including Derek. The entry detailed how they tied her up and took turns, using her body for their entertainment. Yet, despite the humiliation, Isabel craved it, describing the thrill of submission and degradation as something she couldn't live without, like an addiction. Ethan felt bile rise in his throat as he realized this wasn't just infidelity. His wife had become someone else entirely, someone who relished in the depravity. Her words dripped with desire, not regret, and it was clear she had embraced this new life willingly. Ethan's vision blurred with rage and betrayal. The woman he had loved, sacrificed everything for, was gone. All that remained was a hollow shell who had traded their life together for a world of submission and humiliation. The confrontation was inevitable. His fury simmered as he waited for Isabel to return, knowing that nothing between them would ever be the same again. When Isabel returned home from her trip, she stopped short at the sight of the duffel bag and journal laid out on the kitchen table. Ethan was standing beside them, his face hard, his eyes filled with an icy anger she had never seen before. "What is this?" Ethan's voice was cold, his fury barely restrained. "How long have you been lying to me?" Isabel froze, her mind racing. She quickly attempted to mask her panic with a shaky laugh, stepping forward cautiously. "Ethan, what are you talking about? Why are you going through my stuff?" "I'm talking about this." Ethan pointed sharply at the journal, his jaw tight. "I read it, Isabel. I know what you've been doing behind my back." Her eyes darted to the journal, and for a moment, She seemed to falter, but then she straightened, her tone defensive. You went through my private things? You had no right to do that. You're invading my privacy. Ethan's jaw clenched harder, but he kept his voice steady. You cheated on me, and you're talking about privacy? You've been lying to me for years. Isabel rolled her eyes, trying to regain control of the conversation. It's not what you think, Ethan. You're blowing this out of proportion. You've always been paranoid, always accusing me of things. Paranoid? Ethan let out a hollow, bitter laugh. I wasn't paranoid. I know about Derek. I know about all of them. Isabel's face tightened, but she refused to back down. It wasn't like that. It was just Derek. We never planned for it to go this far. It was a mistake. A mistake. Ethan's voice rose, his anger bubbling over. 60 men, Isabel. 32 after we got married. That's not a mistake. Her eyes widened as she processed his words. 60. It wasn't 60. Half of those. She faltered, realizing what she was about to admit. Half of those were before we were even married. We were already together, Isabel. Ethan's voice was sharp as a knife. We were engaged. You were supposed to be mine. Isabel stepped back, suddenly realizing the hole she had dug herself into. Her voice softened as she tried to deflect the blame. You weren't around, Ethan. You were always working, always tired. I felt alone. You're really going to stand there and blame me for this? Ethan's eyes burned with fury. I worked myself to the bone to support us, to support you. And you were out there, letting Derek and God knows who else pass you around like some toy. Tears began to form in Isabel's eyes. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I just wanted to feel wanted. I was lonely. You were passed around, Isabel. You enjoyed it. You craved it. You wrote it all down in your journal, like some sick fantasy. His voice trembled with disgust. How could you do this to me? 60 men, Isabel. You betrayed me 60 times. Her defenses crumbled as she collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. I'm sorry, Ethan. I didn't mean for it to get this far. I just needed to feel something. Ethan's heart was ice cold. The woman he had loved, the woman he had worked so hard to support, was gone. She had become a stranger, lost to her own depravity. He stood there for a long moment, watching her break down in front of him. But her tears couldn't undo the damage. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving her alone with her guilt and regrets. The day after the confrontation, Ethan was resolute. He wanted a divorce, but Isabel wasn't ready to let go so easily. Instead of the pleading tears he expected, she put on a mask of concern and vulnerability. Ethan, please don't do this. You don't understand, Derek. He's dangerous. He's been threatening me. I'm scared, Ethan. I need your help. Ethan paused, his heart torn. Despite everything, a part of him still cared for her. What do you mean? What's he done? She looked up at him with wide, teary eyes. I don't know who else to turn to. Please, just meet me later at the old factory by the docks. I can explain everything. But I need you there. Against his better judgment, Ethan agreed. The last remnants of his love for her clouding his judgment. The idea that she could be in danger was enough to sway him. Maybe, despite all that had happened, he could still help her. That night, Ethan arrived at the factory, his heart pounding, expecting the worst. But as he stepped into the dimly lit space, his world shattered in a way he could never have imagined. Isabel was there, but she wasn't in danger. She was in the center of the room, surrounded by over 10 men, all part of another of Derek's twisted parties. The moans of pleasure filled the air as Isabel writhed in ecstasy, consumed by the degradation she had come to crave. Ethan's breath caught in his throat, his heart pounding in his chest. He tried to back away, but suddenly, Derek's bodyguards appeared, blocking the exits. They forced him forward, making him witness the spectacle in front of him. His wife, completely lost to her addiction, surrounded by men who used her without shame. Derek emerged from the shadows, smirking as he stepped beside Ethan. Did you really think you could save her? Isabel belongs to me now. Ethan's fists clenched, but the guards held him back. He had been lured here, manipulated by Isabel one last time, and now he was forced to watch her final betrayal. Her body trembled in the throes of pleasure, and she barely acknowledged his presence. She was too far gone. Derek leaned in closer, his voice dripping with malice. "She's mine, Ethan. She loves this. And now you'll stay and watch." Ethan's mind screamed with rage and pain, his last bit of love for Isabel destroyed. He had been tricked, ambushed, forced to witness the final act of her betrayal. But as he stood there, helpless and humiliated, something inside him hardened. This wasn't the end. Derek and Isabel thought they had broken him, but they hadn't seen what he was truly capable of. After witnessing the horrific scene of Isabel's ultimate betrayal, Ethan felt something inside him die. He had come to the factory believing, however foolishly, that he could save her, but instead, he had watched her degrade herself willingly, surrounded by men who used her like a possession. He was a shell of the man he had once been. His heart, his love, everything he had poured into their marriage was crushed under the weight of what he had seen. The pain was unbearable, a deep, gnawing ache that left him feeling empty, devoid of hope. But through the hollowness, something remained, a cold, unyielding resolution. Ethan was broken, but he was not defeated. He stood there, forced to witness Isabel's debauchery and Derek's twisted control, and though his spirit had been shattered, his will to fight was not. If anything, it had grown stronger, as Derek gloated beside him, taunting him with the sight of Isabel's betrayal. Ethan's mind cleared. This wasn't the end of his story. He would rise from the ashes of his broken life, and when he did, Derek, Isabel, and every man who had played a part in this nightmare would pay. He would make sure of it. Ethan left that factory, not with his heart in pieces, but with his resolve forged into something colder, harder, and more dangerous. They thought they had broken him, but they had only unleashed a part of him they had never known existed. What Derek, Isabel, and the others never knew was that Ethan wasn't just a simple man working construction and delivering food. Beneath his modest exterior, Ethan was the heir to $1 billion estate, an empire he had kept hidden. He had chosen a life of humility, wanting to build something with Isabel on his own terms. But now, that hidden fortune became his greatest weapon. Ethan quietly used his connections and wealth to dismantle Derek's life with cold, calculated precision. The first step was Derek's career. Through his network of contacts, Ethan ensured that Derek's employer learned about the depraved parties Derek had hosted, events where Isabel had been passed around like a toy for Derek's pleasure and that of his business clients. Word spread quickly, and soon Derek was a pariah in the corporate world. His once promising career crumbled, and his reputation was irreparably damaged. But Ethan wasn't done. He knew about Derek's drug abuse, how he supplied controlled substances to his guests to make the parties even more exciting. Ethan gathered the evidence, enlisting private investigators to dig deep into Derek's illegal activities. Once he had all the proof he needed, Ethan leaked the information to the authorities, making sure the police raided Derek's home. Drugs were found, and Derek was swiftly arrested, his public downfall accelerating with every new revelation. The trial was a spectacle, the media feasting on every sordid detail. Derek's drug-fueled sex parties, his exploitation of Isabel, and his criminal activities came to light, leaving him a broken man in the public eye. His financial ruin followed swiftly, but that was only the beginning of his suffering. Sentenced to prison, Derek's life took a darker turn. Inside the walls of the prison, Derek became a victim of the same kind of degradation he had once inflicted on others. No longer in control, he was forced into submission by the prison's power hierarchy. Baba, the notorious inmate who ruled over the weaker men, claimed Derek as his own. Stripped of his power and pride, Derek became Baba's bitch, a nickname that spread quickly through the prison. He was used and discarded just as he had used Isabel and others, forced to endure the same humiliation he had once relished inflicting on those around him. The man who had controlled Ethan's life, who had orchestrated his humiliation, was now living in his own personal hell. Derek's life of power and debauchery had been replaced with fear and submission, a fitting end to the man who had once prided himself on dominating others. Months later, Ethan stood on the balcony of his high-rise penthouse, overlooking the city below. After his father's death, Ethan had inherited the family's billion-dollar estate, making him one of the wealthiest men in the city. Isabel had mocked him for years, never knowing that he had been the heir to a fortune. choosing instead to live humbly while supporting her dreams. Now he had everything, and those who had wronged him had nothing. Derek rotted in prison. The men who had touched Isabel were ruined, and Isabel herself was a shadow of her former self. Ethan had rebuilt himself from the ashes of their broken marriage, and now he stood stronger than ever. He was free, and that's the story. Now where's my little bitch? Ethan sacrificed everything for Isabel, only to discover her ultimate betrayal. But Ethan isn't just an ordinary man. He's the heir to $1 billion fortune, and now he's using that hidden power to destroy those who wronged him. Derek, the man who led Isabel into a world of debauchery, will lose everything, including his freedom. Will Ethan find peace in his revenge, or will the darkness consume him? Hi, I am Baba. This story was told to me by Derek.
That's the story I've shared with you today. If you enjoyed it, make sure to check out my playlist for more similar stories.